Okay, it is time. Welcome to our exclusive for June. We have on today's exclusive some guests, some of our customers from Midmark RTLS. And our guests today, Susan and Kendra, are going to be sharing one of I guess probably the best way to put this is that we'll be talking about your journey, your whole XCL journey over the last almost year, where you started, where you are now. I know that, Susan, we did a white paper on this already. So you wrote up your whole case study and shared it with us to talk a little bit about where you are at the midway point during the pilot point. So I'm really excited today to have folks catch up to where are they now? What are we doing today? And what were the different points along the way that got you to where you are? So we'll be talking about your journey with XCL today. We're going to be talking today about integrating with other systems in your organization. So one of the biggest challenges in our field in learning and development is that we have systems that introduce redundancy. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about what I mean by that. Actually, Susan and Kendra are going to be a perfect example of what I mean by that today. But we do have a lot of technology already in the organization. And one of the things that our team at Build Capable does is when we're working with organizations, we identify what are all the tools and technology that you already have and you already use, what's working, what's not, how are you using it? And that helps us solve a lot of problems about how do people get access to training and support. Because sometimes you'll hear folks in the L&D world say, oh, you need to do training, you need an LMS. But that's not true. So jumping straight to an LMS and saying, oh, this is something you have to have in your tech stack, that's definitely not accurate. And this is not a new thing. We've been talking about it since, I don't know, what, Rob, like over a decade or more, about how you didn't need an LMS, especially with the introduction of the XAPI standard. And so there are a lot of things that we can do with modern technology that mean that you don't have to have a learning management system anymore. There might be other reasons why you have one, but we're going to talk about today what are some of the barriers and how are some of the ways that you might use XCL and maybe other tools. Really, I want you to think about other tools you might have in your tech stack, existing in your tech stack in your organization that you might be able to have to work with. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Welcome, Susan. Kendra, tell us a little bit about how did you even find out about this? And Susan is very organized and put together some slides to show you the visual journey. And Susan, as you do that, tell us, as you're going through the slides, tell us what we're seeing too.
Of course. So, hi everyone, I'm Susan. I just want to acknowledge I don't have an L&D background. I actually started my career in architecture of all things. Kendra's here along with me. Kendra oversees our support team and has a ton of responsibility for making sure things work in all of our systems. And so Kendra is going to be able to explain a bit more about the back end of things. But when I came on board with Midmark about a year and a half ago, there was a legacy LMS already in place. And this was something that was selected as a low cost solution. It was recommended by another business unit. And one of the things I think to know is that we are trying to offer training to external partners and external customers. So it's also helpful for us from an onboarding perspective. But in terms of user management, it's a big lift. It's something that Kendra's team was managing. And to say that there was a lot of overhead, I think is an understatement. So Kendra, do you want to talk a little bit about what you and your team would do, both to set up the users and the courses?
Yeah, so we had a couple different ways of doing the courses. We had a mix of videos, we had a mix of PowerPoints, maybe we had a couple quiz questions we threw in there. So that took quite a bit of time to set up. And then when we got the users, sometimes they'd come in through our support tickets and they would get access 1s and 2s, or sometimes it would come from Susan and our customer success team as a spreadsheet. And what we were finding with this method was we may have a spreadsheet of 20 people, Sometimes that import would go fine from the spreadsheet. Sometimes we'd have to reformat what we got from Susan and team because maybe something changed in the LMS of the way it needed to import. And then sometimes it just didn't work. So we'd be hand entering 20 users sometimes, which wasn't an easy way of doing it. And I mentioned how we have a ticketing system. So we actually use Zendesk for that. So it felt awkward to have them sign into Zendesk and then, oh, let's jump over to this other thing and let's have them sign into that one. And it's not even the same connection. We have to set them right back up in this other LMS.
And I think with that, we found low adoption rates. I had a report of about 75 users that were given access and never actually logged in. What I'm sharing here on the screen is just an example of what the metrics look like. It looks flashy, but at the end of the day, I couldn't actually get the reports that I needed from a compliance perspective. And then probably the biggest disappointment of all of this is that the platform was designed with a cost structure that scaled with growth. And so we had user limits that we were trying to maintain so that we could manage our budget. And in a way, it felt like we were going to be punished for the success of the platform. And I think that was something that really helped when I was making the business case of why to migrate off of this platform. Because as Sarah was mentioning earlier in our discussion, a lot of work went into setting this up. There was some sunk cost identified with this of all the time and energy invested. Lucky for me, I won a gifted subscription to XCL. And so what happened is I attended a conference in Salt Lake City last year. It is no more, unfortunately, but it was a wonderful experience. I saw Sarah present and explain the XCL platform, give a wonderful demo. And every day at the end of the conference, they did this fun Dream Crusher game where they gifted dozens of prizes. And I literally turned to someone when Sarah presented this as a prize and I said, I need this. And 20 seconds later, I actually won it. So that was such a wonderful way for me to be able to bring this to our organization and say, look, it's risk-free. We can try it out. We can run a pilot and not have to really pivot off of our other platform until we're confident that this is going to work for us.
Susan, going back to that, when you are piloting XCL, you could still have your LMS. There was
We did.
nothing requiring you to move off of that system because XCL is not an LMS. It's a completely headless
Correct.
solution, which you're going to talk about in a second. So it's a very easy thing to pilot and to test alongside your LMS because it does extend the features of your LMS, even if you were to keep it. In your case, you
Yes.
definitely didn't, but it's
Yes.
the same type of thing that I think a lot of folks struggle with is how do I pilot this other learning management system? Most people can't even get a platform set up to actually fully test it. You might get a sandbox or environment, but it doesn't really give you enough functionality to see if it will meet your needs. I'm really glad that our solution is lightweight enough to be able to give folks the opportunity to do that, which was really cool. And I'm glad that you were able to do that. And it's wild that you won it because the Dream Crusher thing that Jeff Batt put together, it's first of all, it's super fun, but there were hundreds of people there. And
Yes.
the fact that you won this was nuts. I
It
can't
was,
believe that. It was very serendipitous because his Dream Crusher tool is like an automated tool
yeah,
that just randomly picks people. So it was very neat.
I do have good luck in winning raffles, I will say. So it worked in our favor. And what we did, to your point, we maintained our LMS for probably 9 months while we stood up XCL as part of our Zendesk instance. So we actually built separate training. We always had the intention of building new training. So our technical certification stayed on the LMS. And then we brought sales and product training into our Zendesk instance. So this is just a little snapshot of what that interface looks like. One of the reasons we were excited about this is because we've used Zendesk for a long time. As Kendra mentioned, it maintains our servicing tickets. It also is our knowledge base. It's where you can find all of our product guides and technical literature. But we haven't necessarily seen great adoption to that platform other than being guided by our support team. And so when we were thinking about having separate logins for an LMS and our knowledge base, that was just confusing people further of why do I go if I need help from Midmark RTLS or if I want to learn from Midmark, where do I have to log in? How do I find the right content? So what we loved about this is all self-guided. Once you log into the platform, you can come directly to the learning library, click any link. Our modules are built in Rise, and they all operate independently without Kendra's team having to lift a finger. Now, that being said, our first iteration was a little clunky. We really wanted to utilize Zendesk for the security factor behind it, but we didn't have it set up where it actually passed the authentication forward. So we had this iframe, and Kendra can talk more about the programming side of that. But what you essentially had to do as a user was log into Zendesk and then re-enter your information, passing it through to XCL. And as the person who manages the records on the back end, I can tell you that the free text entry created a huge headache for me. Some people used acronyms for their business names, other people used their Yahoo logins, which did not help me tie them back to their correct business unit. So that in and of itself was not ideal on the back end. From a user perspective, they were stuck scrolling within the Zendesk article itself. So you see here that you're in a Zendesk article, and then the frame of the learning module would scroll in a static way. You just scroll inside of a window. So it didn't work with any accessibility tools. It didn't allow you to have a truly full learning experience. And it came up short just of the optimal environment that we wanted to offer people. Kendra, anything you want to add on your side? Like I know also is a bigger headache to program this into Zendesk.
Yeah, we ended up doing a code snippet that our marketing team could use when they need to publish something. And it is just like Susan has here. It's a window into this link. So it wasn't the easiest to manipulate. Sometimes Zendesk and XCL would get disconnected in a way, and sometimes we'd have to rebuild the iframe if there was updates of some sort between Windows and all the internet stuff. Sometimes on certain browsers it wouldn't really show up properly, so it did create a little bit of a headache that way.
And I think this is a good example of taking that first step of saying, here's the experience that we want, is we want them to be able to access training in Zendesk. And I think it's really interesting because at the time when you all were doing this, we didn't really have a lot of information about what you all were doing with XCL. We knew you had it, and we knew that you were figuring out how to work it in Zendesk. Susan and I had conversations that said you really need to add SSO, right? You need to add the authentication connection so that we can pick that up. But in the meantime, while you're piloting this and saying, here's how we build the business case for this solution, it was really interesting when I found out about how you all were doing it to see what are the different ways that somebody might hack around and try to make a lower level account work. The reason why I bring this up is that there are some organizations who can work with a low level subscription of XCL and it will work beautifully because they're not necessarily doing this to authenticate someone. They're not necessarily capturing the data for compliance purposes. They're just trying to capture data about what's happening in a given e-learning or other type of content. I think what was important about what you're doing is how can I get an accurate training record? And in that case, it was really helpful to say, look, they're already logged into Zendesk. How can we just make sure that we identify them? So that's where I do think that there are going to be a lot of use cases where folks are like, oh, I don't need to add SSO. The form is fine. How we have this is fine. Or the administrative effort of dealing with, I don't know, 100 people is really not that big a deal. I can go in and clean it up. But what if you didn't have to? What if you didn't have to
Yes.
deal with the typos? So talk to us about what happened next.
Yeah, so we were very fortunate to get to work with Rob and figure out how to stand up SSO with the Zendesk instance. And so on the left here, you see a new version of what it looks like when a user logs in and sees an article. that is effectively the introduction or the welcome page to their learning experience. So now it's a simple launch course button that you press, and it opens everything in a new tab. So you get to have the full learning experience in the browser as it was always intended. And I, on the reporting side, get the actual data as it's already validated within Zendesk. So I'll stop sharing so we can just have a conversation. But Kendra, if you want to talk a little bit more about that process, because I have great appreciation and very little understanding of what it actually took to make it happen.
Yep. So my manager is one of the Zendesk admins as well as myself, and he was able to work with Rob to set up a JSON web token, a JWT token. So between the two of them, they found some JavaScript we could do in Zendesk with that token. And what happens when you launch that course, it puts in a URL that has the user's email, first name, and last name. That's really all we care about. You can do more with it, but that's most of what we wanted to gather. That's where we saw the most issues with entry manually. Like Susan said, they concatenate or shorten their business name in URL of their domain for their email. That doesn't really help us when we're trying to do compliance. So Adam and Rob were able to work together to figure out that connection and get that set up so that when we go into XCL and look at the activity and the reporting, we can see those users. On the XCL side, in those templates, we set it up to be, I think the word is unauthenticated, if I said that correctly. I always mix that one up. So we did anonymous access and then bypass the landing page with the login information. So that for them looked pretty seamless when they're going from Zendesk to the XCL, where it displays that the X API course.
And I think that what's interesting here is that we're calling this single sign-on, but Zendesk actually doesn't allow you to use their login as an authentication. They don't allow you to pick up the login. But what's fascinating about the way that XCL works is that XCL content, any packaged XCL content, lives inside of wherever you put it. And the whole thing lives inside of it. So we don't create user accounts. We're not duplicating any accounts on our end. We have no opinion of what happens. So that content is yours. All we're doing is packaging it with some magic. You're putting it in whatever place you're putting it. And that allows that piece of content to pick up whatever tokens, authentication that is already in that system because it lives there now. It becomes part of it for all intents and purposes. So what that means is that because Zendesk allows these tokens to be used, we were able to pick up and say, okay, Kendra, you're logged into Zendesk, you're navigating help, you're going out to, and oh, here's a training course that you want to have access to. You go in, you select that module, it pops up. Zendesk knows you're still Kendra. This lives inside of Zendesk. So that token is just being passed along and saying, yep, still Kendra here. And all we're doing is catching the data that comes back from it and saying, okay, now we know everything that Kendra's doing in this. And there's no additional login. There's no clunky anything. There's no iframes. There's no pop-up windows. There's no nothing else. It's just the content. And all we're doing is capturing the data. And I think it's important to note that we're not the only system in the world that's ever integrated with anything, right? Rob and I have worked for decades on integrating with other systems. The difference with XCL is that this is something that takes days instead of months or sometimes a year to implement. This is very easy to implement because we're not replicating that account structure. So for those of you who are trying to figure out the tech speak of this, the simplest way to put this is that XCL is a tool. It's not a system or a platform. Your users, your learners never go to XCL ever. You have an administrator that uses XCL to create links and QR codes for physical spaces to your content. And when somebody uses that link, we're able to track everything that happens in the content. So it could be e-learning, like in this example with Rise content, Rise authored content. It could also be videos and PDFs and even images and websites and things like that. So we can track lots of different things, even VR. But one of the things that you have to figure out is, what do I need to know about the person? And that's where you get all of these different options. You can have them fill out a form. You can set up SSO. So it's, oh, sign in with my Microsoft account, sign in with my Google account, or whatever authentication. Or you could say, I'm already in Zendesk, I'm already in Salesforce, I'm already in Epic, or whatever the system they're already in, and then grab that information about the person because that content is already in there. So Kendra, the page that Susan showed with the button that says launch course, what do you have to do to set that up?
We put some custom JavaScript into our Zendesk theme, and then based on, it's going to get technical. So based on that, we set up a class within the HTML behind the button. And when the button's clicked, that class fires and the JavaScript picks it up and then passes through the user's credential into the URL.
And so all they need from XCL is the XCL link. And then they're plugging it in to the authentication method that's set up. And so then once it's set up, Kendra, after that, all you need is the XCL links for the content, right?
Yep.
So I think that it is really interesting to think about what could be. There are a lot of folks that talk about supporting their audience, right? Supporting their learners. And like Susan mentioned, these folks that you're supporting are external partners, right? Tell me, what does Midmark do? Tell me about your work.
Yeah, so we are a technology company. We do real-time location services within hospitals and clinics. So we manufacture the system itself, and then we have distributors who do the installations and setup. So we're using this primarily to educate on the technical side, but as of late, we just launched a new side of our platform with Bluetooth Low Energy. And so it's a completely different way of working with us, which is why we needed to expand our education opportunities. Typically, we would have sent people out in the field, and we don't have a full training team to get around to every state across the country and meet you where you're at. And so we really needed something that could be on demand, get you when you need to use it. And I think an important note is there's no repercussion for scaling. In fact, the bigger we go, the better we do. And so we've got about 1,500 people that we want to be utilizing this platform in the next 6 months. And so that's something, when I was making the business case, that was a huge value add, to be able to know that the cost of XCL is the cost of XCL. There's no escalation clause to it. And therefore, from a budgeting perspective, it was a lot easier to make that case and get approval. One other thing, just as an aside that I want to note, you talk about the user experience of it. When we got stuck with our previous platform, one of the challenges is if a user wanted to return to a previous section, the platform would not maintain their progress. There were trade-offs of choices we had to make about sequential learning and the ability to go back. And so people would lose their progress if they needed to reference back to something. And so again, it felt like the platform was punishing them for their success and making it harder to learn and harder to move forward. So also really appreciate that XCL keeps track of your progress within the module. And I can see one of the things Kendra and I were talking about with understanding the value of the newest content. Do people keep getting stuck at the same point in a module? Is there some place that we've made it too hard to advance or too confusing to continue? And we can see that with XCL. And that is something that we had no visibility to in our former platform. So we're also getting a better understanding of how our content is supporting the learning experience. And the setup is just so easy. Kendra wrote some special code, but in terms of populating a course on XCL, I think it takes 5 clicks to get it published, and it is maybe a 3-minute process once it's ready to go.
So there's so much that you said just but I want to recap it because these are huge pieces of why I said this is one of the biggest wins of my career, is seeing this happen finally after working for decades with learning management systems and trying to do integrations, and like, why is this so difficult? Being able to see how easy it is to say, I have this content, I want it to be where people already work. I want to know that it was them that did it. And I want them to have a good user experience. I want it to be accessible. if they leave and can come back to it, even if they go to a different device, I want it to put them back in the same place. And I want to be able to know what happened. And I don't want it to be so clunky and all these user interfaces and pop-ups and all this stuff. I just need that to be simple, and it should not take me a week to do this or days or manual work. I just need to be able to say, put this here, let people use it, and it all works. Furthermore, I should not have to spend my valuable time trying to figure out how many seats do I have in this LMS that I can do within our budget and be taking people out and be like, oh, I'm sorry,
Yes.
we're at a limit for this month. We only have a budget for this many active users. You have to wait till next month to take your training, or you have a spike where it's like, we have 1,500 people this month. So now I have a spike in what I have to pay. Kendra was talking about how having to go and unlock people out of their accounts, and it's a system they never log into unless they have to do training. So all of these things are all things that are, anybody who's worked in this field for any period of time has to have experienced one of the things I just described if you do anything with e-learning, because it is so common. And so being able to have a solution that addresses all of that in such an easy way, for me, the rest of everything else can be fine, right? I just needed to have this exist in the world and make our lives a little bit easier. Having done this job, it can be so frustrating. I did want to address a question in the comments here in Zoom. Jacobs in the comments had asked Rob, so SSO doesn't require OAuth. Can you tell us how you answered that for the folks playing along on the home game?
Yeah, so if you're playing along at home, Jacob brings up an interesting point, which is we say SSO and SSO, but we don't require SSO. So at the end of the day, OAuth, SAML2, like we support actual SSO reaching out, doing authentication and validation. In this use case, authentication was already assumed. The link is within a logged in area. You don't need to re-authenticate. We just need the data that we need to finish the actor object. So we've just tweak things such that if you send us that in params or in a token of some kind, whatever you've got, we'll work with it and we'll figure out how we suss out those particular data that we're looking for. So yeah.
And that's what makes it possible to integrate with all of these existing systems that you're already logged into, WordPress, website, like whatever things you already have, you're already logged into it. And because this lives within there, we're not trying to make another account somewhere else for you. It already lives in there. It's just going to pick it up. And so I think that the most interesting thing that I want everyone to take away today is if you are experiencing these kinds of problems and you wish that you could just put training where people already are and know that it's them and let them go back to it and not lose any progress and get all your reporting, gate the content so that the wrong people don't get access to it. It's like, I need them to be logged into this area of this help site or this sales page or whatever it is. And then we can make sure that you're getting all of those data. Then reach out to us. So Rob, tell us, how can the people let us know what their use case is and let us help them figure out what might be a good solution for them?
So I'm just going to drop in the chat a contact link. Just reach out to the website, fill out a contact form, set up a meeting with us. Let's chat about it. Let's suss that out together. We love to hear these rich use cases. We want to know what you've got going on. We've got solutions for you. We can craft them on the spot too. And especially if your use case sounds similar to what Sarah's saying, to what everyone today is saying, is I've got a place where people are and I need to get those people training. That's where XCL comes into play. Just drop a link where the people already are, and we can reduce the friction of opening that link by passing information as we need to, doing all that tech wizardry that you don't want to have to think about.
And so just so you know, that web address, it's buildcapable.com/XCL/contact. And we will put that information in the LinkedIn Live comments as well. So thank you everyone so much for joining us today. Super huge thank you to Susan and Kendra for being such excellent partners and allowing us to help you sort this out. And it's so exciting to see where you are today and how we've helped you solve this problem. We hope that you all will join us for our July exclusive. We'll be publishing the topic for that soon, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.